Welcome to the Crafty Mini, and in this one it's a miniature I showed in a few videos ago. I'd rebought a slightly smaller version of the Butcher from Diablo. It's not like an official miniature, but it is the Butcher from Diablo. It's got everything on there. But yeah, I showed this in a video a few weeks ago and mentioned that I was going to go back and paint it again and do something a bit different. So that's what we're going to be looking at in this video. So the main difference is going to be the actual flesh. I'm going to do something, some freehand sort of scale work and some other bits and bobs. So starting off with a reddy brown undercoat, and I've got this flesh tone, and I'm just going in now, and I'm similar to the original. So it's going to have like a very fleshy belly, chest area, and the sort of overhang on his chin. And I'm just popping this on now. It looks quite stark in contrast at the moment, and it does until we start blending the redness of the skin into this colour. So it's just a case, first of all, just getting this base coat down, and then we'll start and go in later and pick out all these little details and bumps and things. And then the idea I was thinking for the actual red part, so across his shoulders and like the top of his head down his back, I'm going to do this sort of scale freehand work. Just as it was like an idea, just to give him a bit more visual sort of interest, and again push that contrast on there and just make it look a little bit different. With the finished piece, it's one of the few I'm actually happy with. I think it's come out quite nice. But yeah, we'll see that towards the end of the video. But so this initial stage is just getting this flesh tone onto the base coat, roughly where I want the lighter skin, and then we'll start blending from there. And you can see there, so it's gone up towards the shoulders a little bit and on his biceps. Now obviously with the blending, that area is going to come down. So now we're going to start on the actual red, the base red of the skin, and just start working out. And if I do go over the top of where that flesh area is, that's fine, because again we'll wet blend that back in with the two colours. But it's just a case now going around picking up some details and making that reddy brown base coat pop now with a really nice deep red. And just going around and picking out anything on there, and again just sort of like the areas between the light and the dark skin, mapping those out and figuring out exactly where I want this, and starting to work that through. Now, one thing I should mention as well is the idea for this video. So the original piece, really enjoyed painting it. It was slightly larger scale, I think, because I'm pretty sure this is at 32mm, and the last one I believe was 54mm. So although this is a touch smaller, the main reason I wanted to repaint it is I wasn't happy with the paint job on the original, and when I saw this for a smaller scale, I can use this in some tabletop gaming as well. So that's the sort of reasoning behind it. And it's one of those, like, if you can, I think if you go back to an older project, you don't have to go and buy the new miniature. You could just strip the paints off and start from fresh, of course. But sometimes it's nice to go back to an older project. And the main reason was, although I liked all the blending on the skin on the original, there was no sort of breakup that helped with the blending. And so that's what we'll be working on here as we go through these clips. Right, so this is the beginning step of where I've decided to change things on the actual paint scheme of this creature compared to my previous. So going through with, I've got a little bit of black on the wet palette, and I've actually mixed it in with that reddy orangey colour that I've used for the base tone on the skin, just to not make it as harsh, because we're going to use the actual black a bit later on. And I'm just sort of going in there freehand, and I'm drawing out these random scales and dots. And you'll see that in order to make it look a bit more realistic as a pattern, as it goes to the back, those scales become much larger and then smaller when it gets to the smaller details like the head, and then where it meets the sort of the flesh tone on the belly and the front of the miniature, and working its way through. And at this point it's very, very stark. But once we add the other colours and the other little bits of process later on, it does blend together quite nicely, and it just gives that bit more visual interest, especially front on, when you're looking at the face and the front of the shoulders above the chest as it wraps round to the back of the miniature. And this was the main reason. It was just something I wanted to try. I did something similar a few years ago when I did sculpted like an alien bust and painted it myself. Very similar colour scheme as well, because that adds some of the fleshy colours into the red, and this contrast with the dark sort of scaling, I found it was really nice, and it made it just pop a little bit more. And this is one of the beauties of our hobby. You've got these, you know, these bits of plastic, resin, metal or whatever, and we can paint them however we want and try new things and not get worried too much, because again, it's a mantra that's always mentioned on this channel. You can just start again, paint over or strip it if you need to, if you've already, you know, gone a bit too heavy on the paints, and go from scratch. And each time you're learning something new, another sort of like brush control or another trick that you can add to your arsenal when you come into painting other miniatures and things. And this was it's just something different, and it was a lot of fun. And you can notice here, once I'm getting to the point where I think that's the edge of where these sort of dark scales are going to be, they get a lot smaller. And then on the bigger areas of the back, they're getting, as I mentioned, they're going to get a lot bigger, more random shapes and breaks in between. But yeah, you'll see in a second how it's turned out. So this is him so before we blended anything on the front, but you can see there at the back the variation in size of scales. He's got these weird little pustules that stick out every so often, so I've sort of gone round them as if the skin's broken a little bit, and this is more of like a harder crust where these black spot marks are. And you can see where it goes into smaller spots where the red of the skin meets that more fleshy tone. And just the idea being that maybe the red skin sort of gets hard and crackles, and it's more sort of callous, like a well-worn foot, and then as it gets to the fleshier part that's, you know, not under the elements all day every day, that's where it starts to soften, and you just get these smaller bumps. Now at this point we're mixing the initial red with the actual flesh colour on the belly, pretty much 1-to-1, and I'm just going through and I'm starting to blend in that area where those two colours meet on the mini, because I want it to obviously have a smoother transition. It looks a bit too stark at this point, and it's just a case now of going back and forth and adding more of one colour than another, and just slowly blending through till I get a really nice transition that I'm happy with. Now, this is something I've done a lot on the channel, something I like doing with my minis. Now, once I've got to a point where the two colours are blended in and I'm pretty happy with how they're looking, I like to just unify everything with a very light wash. So I've just got some army painted dark tone, heavily watered down, and I'm just popping that all over just to get into some of the recesses, make those details pop a bit more, because we're going to go through and highlight them. But it also just starts to bring all the colours together, because they've got this overall imagine sort of filter layer, and it's just bring everything together, and then we'll go from there. And it just, as I say, marries everything up, and I find it easier to paint because I can see where those blends are, where the darkest areas are going to be for the highlights and things like that. And it's just a really easy way of using washes that just again brings everything together and unifies all those base layers ready for the highlight layers. Right, so once that's dry, now it'll look a little bit glossy because of the finish in the actual washes, but again, that's something we'll address with varnish later on. And now it's a case of just going back to the original colour, no extra tones or anything added, and I'm just going in and picking out some of the areas on the actual miniature just to get, again, build up that contrast, make it pop a little bit more, makes the shadows look deeper and dark, and makes the highlights look lighter as well. Now with that, it does, like a lot of paints, once it goes on it's very, very bright and stark, and it looks a bit worrying, but once it dries it does dull down slightly as well. And it's just a case now, as I say, go through, pick out these areas, and then once I see this highlight layer, that's when I can decide, well, do I want to push where it blends into the red a bit more, and go from there. Some of the nice features on this miniature is, if you've got something that's very simple with just big folds of skin and like under the chin, where his chest is on, that goes onto his belly and things, there's a lot of nice little areas that you can pick on and do little scratches and solid lines for highlighting, and just makes it give it a bit more visual interest. When it comes to a big softer area like the belly, I use a heavily watered down, almost like a glaze consistency of the original paint, just so I get a really nice smooth transition on there. And then obviously the little pustules and the bumps we'll pick those out again a bit later. So again, we're doing the exact same technique, but we're going back in with the base red, really simple. There's nothing sort of, no special techniques here. Taking my time, going in, picking out those areas. And again, sometimes with something like the sharp edges on the skin, he's got these like quite pronounced cheeks and this bottom lip and a very pointy nose. It's just going in and touching the edges of those, just to highlight them up. Any more of like the fleshier areas where the red is, it's actually, what I'll do is you'll see me sort of dot and scratch and not doing solid highlight lines, because sometimes that can make it look a bit too unrealistic, despite it being a crazy demon miniature. And then in a moment we'll go through and we'll reblend where the light meets the red skin, just to build that up as well. But just initially going in and just picking out all of those little details, making that skin pop a little bit more. And it's, it's starting to pop now, starting to look good. So again, the original blend colour for where the light and the dark meets, the red and the light flesh, we're going to go through now and re-highlight those areas. Now for the scales as well, because I mixed that red originally just to dull the black down, it was roughly 2 to 1, 2 parts of the red, 1 part of the black. The next part of the process is to go and get the original black and just paint inside each of those little dots and scales, but make sure I don't go right up to the edge. So there's a little bit of variation, and when the eye catches it, they look a lot darker and a lot deeper, but there's a lighter outline that just, the softness and the starkness of that colour will marry better with the red than it would if it was just a black scale. And it's just a case of picking those out. Really simple. And again, so the scales there have had that little bit of extra darkness put in the middle of them, just to make them pop a little bit more, but it still looks quite smooth, and we've got the transition from the black mixed in with the red going to the red skin, so there is a smoother transition there. It doesn't look as harsh. One of the other things as well, so I'll go and paint all the little extra bits like the axe and the hook and the horns and things. There's not footage of that. It's mainly the skin and this freehand that I'm working on, that I wanted to sort of show off on the video. In between the little lines, you'll see me here. What I'm going through now is I'm getting the original red and the mix of that orangey flesh colour for the transition, and I'm adding a bit more red and just going through, picking up around those little dots, and so it just makes the bits of red flesh between them just a bit more stark and pop a little bit more. And I'll do this with the original red as well, as along with that more of a fleshy mix where it needs to be done. And here is in all his glory. So after all the base colours were done, the only thing I had is I did another watered down wash on the front of the actual miniature, just to darken down the flesh colour a little bit, because it looked a little bit too stark. And then picked out all the metal work with various metallics and just a simple brown wash on, just to muddy them up. I didn't want to go too overboard like I did on the original with all the rust and everything, because it's not so much for a display piece. This is going to be played with. Now the last little thing which you've seen in the previous videos with the ogres, just to get all the flesh to marry together, is at the very end, because the washes and the paints are all going to have slightly different finishes, and it does, when you're looking at it, it does look a bit strange. It's a case of just going over everything with a nice satin varnish, and like the wash, it just marries everything together and brings all those details in, and you can see it on the final shots. The details really popped, and it's come out quite nice. I prefer this miniature to the previous one, the larger scale one. I just think the scales, those little freehand marks, these cracks in the skin, just add a little something, a bit more visual interest, and it's not just a big blob of red from the back, and I think it just pops a little bit more. But yeah, really interesting. I did really enjoy repainting this figure. It's nice doing a monster again. But yeah, is it as good as the original? Is it better? At the end of this, I'll do a little side by side, so you can see. And yeah, just let us know what you think. Anyway, hope it's helped and people enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe and all that, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.